All right, everybody, we'll get started. Welcome back to another session on reimagining urban planning. Thank you all for joining us. It's always really fun and exciting to come into this space once a month. There's always people from all over the country and from all over the world, and it is an honor and a very humbling experience to see how many of you all are so committed to thinking about reimagining urban planning. And again, if this is your first time joining our series, this is a workshop number 4. That means that we're going 4 months strong. We got 5 more to go. The rest should be good, but thank you all again for joining us. And the Reimagining Urban Planning series is a webinar series being launched by the Othering and Belonging Institute, where basically what we're just saying is that the current iteration of urban planning is no longer working. And what we're asking for folks to do is to be critical of the field and to think of ways in which we can make the field a little better. And so, without spilling too much tea, I can definitely tell you that APA is listening. I've been in interesting conversations with other folks within APA and other institutions about what we're doing. Uh, and because of this seminar series, the Othering and Belonging Institute will be visiting the Czech Republic in February to bring some of this work out there as well. So all of that is because of you all. Feel free if there's anything you should know is that at the Other and Belonging Institute, we're super open for conversations, feedbacks, and collaboration. Please hit us up. I respond to all the emails, all 300 of you all, but I respond for sure. So we'll get started. Again, what we do every time is we start with what's called the introductory descent. These are just a couple of thoughts, things that are percolating through my mind. This one, oh, someone desde Cancún, Mexico. Hola, buenos días. Aquí es de día todavía. Oh, sorry. I was like, let me switch. um, and so we'll do the introductory descent. Again, a couple of things are on my mind, and then I'll present the speakers that we have today. We'll be in a conversation space for a little bit. This is an opportunity for you all to also plug in questions in the chat. Okay, Metro Planning Research and Development is here. Okay. And so feel free to write in your questions in the chat, or also when we have ready to have discussions to open them up. With that being said, let's get started. I'm going to spotlight myself just because it's easy for the recording. So this again is advocacy and urban planning. And primarily, some of you may know this, some of you may not know this, but I'm trained as a social worker. And when I first became an urban planner, I realized that there was a lot of room in the field of urban planning for advocacy, that we as planners were not being trained to be advocates. So really the question is, what are the shifts that need to happen within the field to make that the norm and not the exception? Now, well-intentioned planners have tried to make planning more equitable by developing engagement strategies that prioritize community knowledge and lived experience, yet we still have to go up against the state or some form of governing body that will either approve or deny a project due to political feasibility. Let's be real, it always is going to come down to political feasibility. The question then becomes, at what point does the urban planner get held accountable and circumvent political feasibility in the name of community benefit? Now, y'all know that we out here doing the engagement. We know the benefits of some of these projects, and then you have a governing body that says no. So what happens to our projects? They get what we commonly call it in the field, they get shelved. Now, I'm an organizer. I can't just sit behind and let projects get shelved. At what point do you call some people out? Now, that being said, there are more of us as planners. I think definitely all of you all for being here and our speakers today who are becoming more unapologetically vocal about the inequities that have persisted within the field and continuously go unchecked. There is an increase, and at the same time, because of that unapologetic vocalness, there is an increase in retaliation against those type of planners. So the question then now also becomes, what are the infrastructures and the systems that we need to protect one another within the field? Because listen, once the state finds out what we're up to, they're gonna go up against us. Now, let me tell you, this session is a little bit personal because it's the reason I became a planner, I guess. And I became a planner because I love my hometown. I love Los Angeles. I love the land of the Tonga folks. I love the place that was once known El Río de Nuestra Señora, la Reina de Los Ángeles, El Río de Puríncula, because Los Angeles has Native history, has Mexican history, has Spanish history, and it has US history. Now, more importantly, I love the people that grew up in the city. I love the fact that Zoom just told me that um, they're trying to confirm the language that I'm speaking in. And I was like, bro, I'm bilingual. How do I tell you that? I love the people that I grew up with me, that grew up in the city. I first became a planner because I knew that the field of urban planning, I didn't know that it existed. I became a planner because I've been a bus rider my entire life. I learned to be an observer and a participant in my built environment. As a student bus rider, I had access to the city, and through each bus ride, I had the opportunity to witness a different shade of Los Angeles. Now, I grew up along the line called the 105, which travels northwest across the city from Huntington Park to West Hollywood. Now, they are two different cities, racially, economically, ethnically, linguistically. Well, in the beginning, I was excited about the fact that I had access to both quinceañeras and the queer clubs. I soon started to realize that the built environment also changed. While South Central was overwhelmingly full of check cashing places, hotels and motels, liquor stores, and fast food restaurants, West Hollywood was the complete opposite. It was a home to grocery stores, hospitals, Planned Parenthoods, coffee shops. Growing up, I was conditioned to believe that only white people deserve nice. Because let's be real, it may be full of queer people, but it's still white gay people. Now, I share this story just to highlight the importance of the built environment and its relationship to human development. Places that we come from highly inform the people that we are, the way we behave, our values, and our priorities. As planners, we have been trained to position the benefit of the state as the focus of our work. But where does that lead us? Now, we need to refocus our practice with a more critical lens. Whom are we planning? And of course, before we can achieve a full paradigm shift within the field, which feels closer than we think, we must advocate for this new way of thinking, a new way of planning. The notion that we as planners must be neutral, objective, no longer works. If we're being honest, the field was never objective nor neutral. It has always benefited those with the most power and resources. We need a politicized planning, a poor people's planning, if you will. Now, I believe that there are two types of planners. One, planners that romanticize the city, and two, planners that want to defend their hood. Now, over the last 20 years, I believe that there are more of us who have come from lived experience in marginalized communities that have entered the field, and the field doesn't know how to handle this. I believe that the field has shifted greatly over the several years as more planners like us stepped into the field. We are planners that are at the intersection of technical experience and lived experience. I joined the field because I only not know gentrification, where I myself and those around me have been displaced. One of the main differentiations between the two type of planners is positionality. While the first type of planner will speak about marginalized communities from a position of other, the second type of planner is part of the other. While planning theory will tell us that we must operate from a positionality of objectivity, we simply can't do that. Objectivity will have planners thinking that we should operate as observers of the built environment, when in reality, we are also participants in the ecology with which we all operate under. Now, the first step to truly being an advocate within urban planning profession is to have an understanding of social theories, critical race theories, gender theories, and other theoretical frameworks that inform our identity, power, and privilege, especially now more than ever. Now, the battle for how, listen, Project 2025, don't get me started. Listen, if you read an excerpt of any of that ridiculous document, you'll realize that we as urban planners are also need to be at the forefront of the battle. We can't talk about engagement for marginalized communities if we can no longer talk about critical race theory or gender theory. It feels like a new type of code switching is being asked of us. And listen, I'm an organizer. I'm always trying to fight somebody. Now I got to do it in these spaces and in workshops and like provide you with some resources. But listen, thank you to Whitney for sharing Project 2025 in the chat. This is collective. This is what we call popular education, y'all. So thank you. Again, having a sensibility of these different positionalities makes it clear that we as urban planners understand that space is political. And then again, I asked the question, who are we planning for? So the main question for this seminar is to think about exactly that. How do we show up to space? We're always going to be in a space. Listen, I'm always going to show up with my identities and my powers and my privilege. I am not exempt of positionality. I may say, I'm not going to say it. I'm from South Central and I am queer and I am brown, but a homegirl also has two masters. So that puts me in a different position of privilege. I can go up into the hood and say I'm from the hood and know what's good for the hood. That's not how it works. But really understanding that my role, while it's not only ensuring that I bring some more equitable engagement strategies in the planning process, is also being critical of the planning process because this process was not created for communities that I come from and communities that I'm in relationship with. So my job is not only ensuring that folks are part of the process, but we're also questioning the process. I was trained to organize contra, desde, y sin el Estado, which translates to within, without, and against the state. Now listen and put me on the record. I don't mind. I may work with the state, but I don't sleep with the state. I will always be against the state. And with that being said, let me turn it over to our speakers. And our first speaker today is someone that I really appreciate, someone who has been creating out here spaces digitally since 2020 and how we think about urban planning, and truly someone who also embodies this type of work. Our first speaker is Dee Powell, who is an Arlington, Texas native, where she graduated from the University of Texas Arlington with her bachelor's in interdisciplinary studies and a master's in city and regional planning. She is an unconventional urban planner with the firm she founded and leads, DRBTS, Do Right by the Streets. Listen, if that's not some good ass name, I love it. I love it. It focuses on placekeeping as a tool to implement temporary to permanent space activation projects in communities of color, driven towards economic mobility and community sustainability. She specializes, okay, Heather McMillan, sorry, I'm seeing the chats. She specializes in educating and breaking down the complexities of urban planning elements within communities of color. Most, if not all, of her inspiration in driving urban planning comes from the beauty of Black culture through music, places, streetwear, sneakers, activism, and Black migration. D, all yours, all yours.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I honestly started in 2020 because of you. So really, I thank you. I appreciate you. You can start the slides. I'm gonna be quick because I don't want to ramble, but I'm happy to be here most definitely.
Can you see the slides?
Yeah,
Okay,
thank you.
cool.
You can go to the next one. So not even talking about me, but the whole reason that I am who I am is because of DRBTS, which was at one point just a blog space during the pandemic, because man, the pandemic did a number on me mentally. But this was a culmination of all the things that I saw when I worked in the public sector as a planner, of that disconnect with Black and Brown folks, of what is planning, how does it impact my day-to-day life, and even just understanding like the basic parts of permitting and policy. So I started DRBTS, or Do Right by the Streets, to start to bridge that gap. All the things that I didn't like about public sector planning, or I felt like we spent too much time on, which was comprehensive planning, large plans, not really getting engaged with people, pushing people to the side, not really taking the time to like get to know community. So hence we birthed this thing in 2020. And to be honest, I had no idea it was going to take off the way that it did. But I'm grateful. And then a big part of it is focusing on placekeeping, or placemaking is what I guess the professional term or whatever is, as a means to rebuild or reframe and refocus how we look at Black and Brown communities, outside of the systems that that we were built into, and kind of what we were forced into. Next slide. So mentioned briefly, I'm from Texas. I live in Houston now. but I'm from Arlington, so that's like 20 minutes ish from Dallas. UT Arlington grad, and like he mentioned, like they mentioned, I really focus on all of these things from a space of music and the way Black people migrate. My family is originally from a very, very rural town in northeastern Louisiana of about 400 people. So you can imagine the difference of going from to visit my grandparents there and then coming back to Texas, and it's almost like day and night. So a lot of my, you know, experience comes from that. And you're right, placemaking is so each. I honestly don't use placemaking a whole lot. I'm using more so placekeeping for the fact that the spaces are already there, so there's nothing to make. I'm 100% focused on keeping people in place, making sure they sustainable community. Um, to the next slide. So really quick, some of the projects that I've worked on from a placekeeping standpoint, I really utilize urban planning as a tool because it is naturally boring. People don't really want to talk about it. People don't want to engage in the conversation and they feel like it's too complex and they've never had anybody really sit down with them. Each of these projects and all of the work that I do, even when it comes down to technical assistance or like breaking it down piece by piece, is about giving people access to it that look like me, in ways that my grandparents can understand it, or my 7-year old could understand it. And so each of these projects embodies that to like this aspect of play, community, but also you're learning something at your own speed, at your own pace. So out of all of these, the one that's the most known is the $27 food park, which was formerly the MLK food park. So taking something very massive, a 30-day project, that impeded on a community that is that's used to it because it's where the state fair is hosted. And I took control of it to do something that was more permanent, semi-permanent, and start to really address one of the bigger issues or one of the issues in South Dallas, which is food access, food security, and economic mobility. So all of these projects have some urban planning in them. The people didn't know it when they got to it. They just they were able to like start to learn it and to see it. So I'm really big on seeing it in real time. You got to see it to believe it, and you're able to like touch it, and that there's another way outside of what we live in currently. Next slide. And these are just pictures from the original MLK food park. All of these things that we hear about and we talk about, colors like make people feel better, sharing your thoughts with people. I've always been horrible at like keep administering surveys and all that kind of stuff. I know, as odd as that sounds, being a planner by trade, because I feel like we always ask the same questions. So we started this in that top left corner, like share your thoughts, where people can really just write what they wanted, whatever. And I've honestly taken that through each iteration of the food park, even in other projects that I'm a part of, and just kind of let people write whatever they want, because that's so much easier to just kind of build genuine relationship and a genuine conversation opposed to like asking people the same 6 questions every time we do a project. Planners are planning processes are very guilty of rinse and repeat, and it don't be effective. You can go to the next slide. These are just more pictures from different projects. The left hand side, we did after school programming, which is kind of untraditional and unusual for planning to like do after school programming, but they go hand in hand. Like you don't have to sit down and talk to kids about urban planning directly, but this particular project was really geared in an after school space that was safe, that kids can hang out at, that before they either had to walk home or they met their parents there, they met their older siblings there. And that is planning in itself. Like that's a third place. They don't know that, but they start to they see and they see something that's different. They see the colors, they see something that's being offered, and they feel safe. So spaces like this, and what you see on the right hand side with the food park, is all about bringing urban planning to people in a way that it's not like being thrown at them or it's being done to them. They get to experience it at their own pace and at their own level. Next slide. Oh, that's just a video from the food park. We've been in a couple of different, I guess, arenas of being on the news and so on and so forth. And that's a big challenge in the community right now. There's a lot to be said. There's a lot of it's good and bad when you see it on the news. But these were some of the things that we really started to like, as the kids say, stand on business about the importance of the food park beyond just being a space that people come to and it's trendy and they post it on social media, but really being able to put this spotlight on the community and the businesses that are there. So that really pour into what we do. So I don't even know if it's gonna play because I think it's embedded, but you can go to the next slide. That was it for me. I appreciate y'all. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I was like out here ready to go. I was muted, but so with that being said, I'm gonna bring our next speaker. Our next speaker is Courtney Morgan, an artist, storyteller, and urban design strategist of Jamaican descent. Courtney Morgan's work redistributes power by using art as a social practice. Co-designed with vulnerable communities, Morgan's civic scale projects have engaged hundreds, both on the street and in venues. These projects include creating space for designers who identify as other, through Only Other Designers and Community Design Lab, an award-winning youth-led environmental design engagement project. Morgan has taught integrated design and design strategy at Parsons School of Design, where she is an AICAD teaching fellow. Courtney Morgan is the president owner of SCRD, a design studio that uses design strategy to center and empower stakeholders to build thriving urban communities. With that, I'll hand it over to you, Courtney.
Thank you. Thank you. While we're getting those slides up, I feel like as you're reading my bio, I got excited. I was like, who's that? Sometimes I forget. Can you all see the slides yet?
Not yet.
Not yet.
No,
Okay.
can't see them. This is Deborah.
I'm getting there, y'all. I'm getting there.
No rush, no rush.
I think they're ready to go. Let me know.
Yes.
Awesome.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide. I'll introduce myself again. There's some intersections there that I wanted to highlight. So I'm Courtney Morgan, she, her pronouns. I am first generation Jamaican American. I'm a mother, a wife, a partner, designer, professor, artist, and researcher. And I identify as other. I come from a long line of dreamers, although I'm sure if you ask my family about that, they would not say that they are. My parents immigrated to the US in the 70s to pursue an education and to create a life that they wanted for themselves. My grandparents moved from the country in Jamaica to the city of Montego Bay to pursue better career opportunities and create the life that they dreamt of. And my great-great-grandparents on both sides of my family really decided to challenge social norms and gender roles by becoming a dual income household, thus creating the life that they dreamt of as well. So this long line of dreamers has really shaped my view of dreaming. I am a practitioner and I practice collective dreaming, radical dreaming, or for the industry folks who are on the call, co-designing, right? And so my focus as a practitioner is to bring institutional resources into the streets and into other spaces. For me, I wanted to show some of the projects that really show not only othering, but advocacy. Next slide. So why marginalized communities? As we have discussed so far, as all of you all are, I'm sure, aware of, there's been decades of disinvestment in marginalized communities. So as an other, I identify as marginalized. I too have struggled to find a voice in how my environment is built. Whether we're talking about my adolescence growing up in a Jamaican household with my grandparents, or when I moved to America to live with my parents in a military Jamaican American household, as a youth, I didn't really have much say in anything. And if we want to fast forward to adulthood as a design student, I struggled to find my identity as a designer. Even at a HBCU, my architectural education really focused on the European canon. So when I entered into the design profession over a decade ago, I struggled to find a job that allowed me to center what I valued, which is community, youth, storytelling, and lived experience. As an other, I felt it hard to advocate for otherness within the practice, and I found it hard to advocate for other ways of practicing. Next slide. So what's missing? I asked the question of what's missing, right? So was it me? Was it the industry? What's going on? Am I really the odd man out? And so I wanted to talk to my community. So I turned to my community in true fashion as a collaborator to ask them what's missing in urban planning. And here's what some folks said. Next slide. So Pickett is a designer in Baltimore, and he feels that advocacy is needed to elevate youth and young adult voices. Oftentimes, planning processes are void of these voices, even though they're often the generation that have to live with the current and future impacts of the decisions that are being made today. So including these voices, the youth voices, young adult voices, it requires a commitment and creativity. You have to actively seek out those voices. You have to think deeply about what are going to be the best ways to encourage, receive, and integrate youth and young adult voices into the planning process and projects. And sometimes people really shy away from that. Next slide. I also spoke with Alice, who is a designer based out in Portland, and she feels that advocacy is important. However, advocacy needs to be supported with budget, time, and resources. So community-led critical history is definitely very important within projects, but we don't invite people who have those lived experiences to come out to share their expertise. And we also need to pay these people, these local historians, community activists, community elders, to help the design team to better understand the layers of history in a community and in an area. And then lastly, I spoke with Jennifer out of New York City, and she believes that advocacy is needed because if planners only see what's there now, then if they only see what's there now and what they want it to become, then the essential part of planning is lost, right? So they lose sight of what's being lost or what has already been lost. They're losing sight of the moments or opportunities for community members to claim ownership and express community initiatives in the past. And, understanding and exploring those community histories is a core competency, and it really values the existing, the marginalized community members and really empowers them. So for Jennifer, understanding and getting a full comprehensive rendering of a site's history is both centering not only the built environment, but the people of that community as well. So next slide. So as an other designer, I'm an advocate, a mediator, a community historian, a broker of empowerment, a radical dreamer, a collective dreamer, and a co-designer. And I value lived experience, other perspectives, oral histories, youth voices, different learning styles, and creative expression. And here I want to say, I'm a designer, parentheses, with a lowercase d. While yes, I am formally trained, I think that we are all designers. And so that's where you get the D with the parentheses, because everyone is creative, everyone is a designer, everyone is designing some element of their lives. So I would encourage all of us to be designers, lowercase d. Next slide. So we spent some time talking about my why advocacy, why others value advocacy. And I'd like to argue that maybe redefine designer just a little bit there. But I wanted to leave you all with 3 ways to cultivate your advocacy muscles. And the first one is going to be move at the speed of trust. You have to allow for the community members to get to know you and allow yourself time to get to know them. Our urban environments are not void of trauma. So trust will take time. The second one is acknowledge and learn the histories of the place and the people. As designers, we need to expand our site research beyond the built environment and acknowledge the communities and the cultures within the space. And then lastly, I will say is to share power. Whatever power you have needs to be shared with those who will be left with the space. It's our duty to co-create and to share power that you have been given. That's it, y'all. That's me.
Thank you so much for that, Courtney. Listen, I got some design questions for you, so I'm gonna hit you up later. But I love the fact that you mentioned, I mean, it has to be politicized, right? Sharing power is important. We can't operate it from a place of like, oh, we're not like political. We are hella political. With that being said, last but not least, I'll share our last speaker, then we'll move on into I saw a question in the chat talking about if we can share our questions in the Q&A. You definitely can share the questions in the Q&A, but also just write your questions in the chat. The awesome, dope ass Mylana, who helps me and supports me with the admin stuff, takes notes of the questions. So she'll probably send them over along as well. So please feel free. Not some of y'all in the chat hitting me up on my phone. See, that's the privilege, share the power. So with that being said, let me introduce our last speaker. Our last speaker, someone who I love dearly, who I love picking their brain, being in relationship with them, who I've known more online and got to meet in person, which was super dope. Our next speaker is Kristen Jeffers. Now, Kristen was one of the first people to bring the concept of Black urbanism to the internet by launching the Black Urbanist, which continues to be a resource for Black urbanisms at the intersections of feminism, disability, and queer trans life. She hosts and produces the podcast Define Identification and is the author of a forthcoming Black Urbanist Journey to an Accessible Queer Feminist Future, along with a companion masterclass, and writes a regular newsletter on Substack called Define Identification and Crafting Liberation. Under the banner of Chris Pattern, she shares her journey into sustainable fashion and invites others to do the same. A sought after public speaker and workshop leader, she resides in the District of Columbia with her partner and fellow Black queer feminist urbanist. With that being said, Kristen, I'll hand it over to you.
All right, y'all. Thank y'all so much for having me today. And I'm going to run my slides. So let me know if y'all are having trouble. Okay. All right. Let me go into slideshow. All right. Yes. So those of you who are familiar with my work have been familiar with all the journey that has taken over the past now 14 going into 15 years. And so today, in spirit of the theme, you're going to see where advocacy comes in, because it's always been about advocacy for me. In the middle of this presentation, I say that advocacy is a lifeline. So once again, welcome back to my journey. If you're new to the journey with me, welcome. If not, I'm glad to see you again. And yes, I'm still here. Those of you who are newsletter readers may be a little worried, but I am here and I'm happy to be here today. So for those of you who need another introduction, I'm proudly millennial, queer, disabled, feminist, urbanist. Right now, dwelling in the Piscataway lands, also known as DC, North Carolinians, in sort of the Creek and Eno, and all of our peoples that were before me, and of course, ancestors brought over through the Middle Passage, and who hung in there in those lands that they landed on for many generations. I am not the first generation to migrate out of our American set of places, but it has affected how I see things in the world. Because as much as I'm a North Carolinian through and through, I've lived in Kansas City, I've lived in Baltimore, I've lived in PG County, and I bring it all to the table. And yes, I am a fiber artist. And yes, that is part of the next chapter and part of how I'm thinking about connecting with communities. Because for me, it all started, I've been fascinated with the Metro map. Growing up in Greensboro, we looked to Atlanta, we looked to DC. Charlotte and Raleigh were not what Charlotte and Raleigh have become. And honestly, Greensboro was definitely a textile powerhouse. Hence why textiles is a big part of my work, because it was textiles that built my community and textiles that allowed my community to become a major city. Yet I feel like we don't always value who we are. And so that started to kind of rain down on me. as not valuing the community that I lived in. And then I was very curious about why didn't we have a system like, why weren't we getting a MARTA? Why weren't we getting a Metro? Why was our bus cutting off? Why wasn't it there? Why did people live in certain areas? Like, and then of course, I'm of that generation. I like to say that I'm a second generation Sesame Street kid and a first generation Reading Rainbow kid. PBS was pivotal. So all that public funding, the media, that's why I'm also, my approach is media. And I literally lead with media first and foremost, oftentimes before I lead with like planning. But of course, I come in as public engagement, as those of you who are familiar with our work. That is generally where I live. And of course, I actually have gone to this Safeway in DC, but unfortunately, Big Bird was not there. And of course, what I love about this effort is that it intentionally centered the Black and Latina cultures of New York, and then of course globally. In fact, there's been a meme circulating on Instagram right now where it talks about how the Big Bird, like we knew him as Big Bird, and there's other Big Birds based on what culture you're in. The colors change. Big Bird's not necessarily yellow. Sometimes the bird's not even big, but there's always a bird, and the birds all go visit each other. They fly to go see each other on the different versions of the show. And just from that time period, being in this generation, it rooted, okay, cities coming together, community, this is a thing we need to do. And all the real people there looked like me. But one thing, that key thing that was different was that we were mostly a rural community, Black rural community. And so when I first experienced gentrification and like this idea that people need to be replaced for the land to have value, that was already weird because of course I grew up with family members that managed to like grow food and provide shelter, and then going into like our kind of market area, our bigger cities, and then that's not necessarily the case. So yeah, one of the first things I noticed, because of course our Southern food culture is unmatched. Our North Carolinian food culture is unmatched. Y'all can argue with me about that, but that's a place for me, going to restaurants, cooking with my family, and then going to these grocery stores, but noticing despite how much we love food and how much money we put into these food stores like this. Now, this one that I'm showing you here, if those of you who know Greensboro, it's South Holden Road. There was a Kmart here. There's a K&W cafeteria, which, cafeteria culture is a big part of the South. But then this Winn-Dixie, which still exists, it was gone. And then I really want to highlight this. I'm going to hang on this slide and talk a little bit about the trend that I'm showing here. I want to honor David Gwynn, a fellow queer urbanist, also from Greensboro, a little bit older than me. And he had hand-drawn this graphic, and then I GIFed it out so that you can see over the course of, and for him, the history was the 30s to like the 90s. I've been nudging him to add on from the 90s to like now. We've continued to see this trend happen. And yes, that is pretty much the boundaries of Greensboro have not changed in several years, but the names of the grocery stores changed. The dots have changed, the chains have changed. And of course, right now I'm soaking on some grocery news here in DC that connects back to North Carolina. You can go on my Twitter account, and I refuse to call it the union, but it's Twitter. But yes, this is noticing that we were driving to the grocery store. And yes, we had access to a vehicle. Yes, two-parent home. Like there's a lot of things that I have. When Richard talked about like opening this chat about privileges, yeah, there's things that I have access to, but this was one of the ways that I noticed that something was different. And then we lived adjacent to, but not in SNF homes. And since I did a version of this presentation last year, SNF homes has been targeted as a place to just be wiped out. They had, even though there's been issues, all of the systemic issues we know about, this community had come together, long-term resident council that was very active, violence interruption that was successful in this community. Yet somehow City of Greensboro decides, oh, well, we don't need it anymore. We're going to tear it down. We're going to use it as like fire and police training. And that really has shook me within the last few years. And this has been a constant case of, okay, the neighborhoods that I'm in, and this is at our actual street. This is what our end of the neighborhood looked like. And now this is a neighborhood that had been redlined, like that it became open to Black and brown communities because of white flight. And then we could purchase homes for a certain amount. And now I'm getting texts. Like my mom has moved a little bit further out to a neighborhood that was also white, also has a whole shopping mall around it. You can tell that it's planned. My elementary school is no longer a regular elementary school. It's going to go Montessori. And I do love that like way of doing things. But this idea that certain schools are closing now in Greensboro, grocery stores are closing, our population has held steady. We go to school, we go to the grocery store, we do things. And even though we've had some changes in our economic balance, we do these things, yet this is happening to us. And even now, of course, I live in DC, so seemingly capital of gentrification here. And I live in the Wharf. And of course, the history of this Southwest waterfront. And I've lived adjacent to, just when I was in PG County, I lived just over the line, the Southwest line. So being almost adjacent to Ward 8, and because of how close we were to the district line, certain things were happening. So just thinking about, as true to a privileged millennial with college education and all of this, the goal is still get the house. Like it's a big deal. Black home ownership. We've had this conversation. You know, Dr. Andre Perry's work where he's literally mapped, and we have the numbers now to see that the same house in a Black community is not the same price as it is in a white community. And likewise, add in all of our other cultures, and like the charts there, it's just not there. And so that is, if anybody's had that question, okay, Kristen, how did you come to calling your practice Define and Eradicating Gentrification? Not just creating this Black queer feminist urbanism, really just sitting down within the last few months and thinking about what Ruth Glass intended when she processized this word of gentrification, and how it was a multi-class community. Like, of course, Islington has been through changes, much like the communities I grew up in North Carolina went through changes. And the housing stock didn't necessarily change, but the people changed. And all of a sudden, with the change of people, the prices, the community assets, all these things are changing. So I'm, you know, as much as I've moved around, I'm still dealing with systemic bias, both in my career itself, as well as what I can afford and what's available to me. And so, yes, this, to answer our bigger question of what is advocacy and planning, I feel like advocacy is the planning practice. For me, advocacy is the life force. I would not be here with you today. I would probably not be alive had I not said, okay, what is happening here? What can I add? And why are things happening the way that they have happened? And so you're looking at a body of like formal work, whereas whether it's public engagements, whether it's working directly in the media, whether it's working in other sectors, that through line is that, you know, in the sense of Audre Lorde, because I'm going to back up for a few and give you a few definitions. Really what drives me is like defining myself for myself. And so, of course, I included here like how I define Black, how I define queer, how I define being a feminist, how I define being disabled, which is kind of the newer thing that I've kind of come to terms with in this COVID time period, and realizing that, you know, ability is important and ability affects things. And then, yes, of course, kind of the thing that has brought us. And I've always, in a lot of ways, when you add words to something, so a lot of people just start with urbanist, whereas me, I started out adding Black, and I realized I'm a feminist, and I realized I'm queer. I am disabled. I'm from the US South, which has its own cultural and has its own like ways of being. So modifying everything up to urbanist, putting these definitions on the table, defining myself for myself, and insisting this is a practice. And I encourage everybody to take yourself through these definitions. And then I just thought about the things that I feel like is Black queer feminist disabled urbanism in practice, like, you know, our spiritual spaces, like all these, the gist of all of this, everything that we provide is that, you know, all these things are human rights. Like these things we should have. And I'm happy to, like, I think I have a version of this on my website. I'm happy to share this so that you all can read through this and really marinate on these. I know there's a lot of words here, being mindful of accessibility, but the gist of this is that and then just if you want to think about like an experience, and I'm glad to have Dee on here with me today because what she has done, like being in practice, and of course, yes, I'm bragging to my mentee at the moment, I love having this moment to share, but she is really like, and many of you who do programming in the community, when you decide when it's time to do public engagement and come into that community, come to their farmers market, come to their church picnic, come to their in Greensboro with our Greek Orthodox Church has this wonderful spread of like Greek food every year. And sometimes the planning department comes to that because they know it's a popular thing. We used to have like a couple of major, well, we had one previous music festival and now we had the NC Folk Festival, which is kind of a nucleus. We just had for 4th of July, we have a big street festival for that. So coming to those times in the community gathers to do art, to eat together, to see each other, to be seen, and not let that deter. And, think about maybe the process that we are already doing where it takes forever to do a thing, to provide a resource. Instead of demonizing people who don't use these resources, realize that for many of them, the relationships are severed or they're damaged. Too many communities have either, just like I talked about, a community being damaged and removed. That's a legacy, our road legacies. And then, of course, waiting on things to happen. We're excited about finally getting that red line in Baltimore. Like it's been overdue. It's been time. And of course, Purple Line debuted this morning. Like just resources that have taken years, being able to push through. And yeah, we're at a moment where we're going to have to really gird up and push through and tap into that life force that is the reason why we are doing our work and why we do choose to advocate. Because everybody has an agenda, everybody has a purpose. There's anybody saying that planning is objective. Yeah, the maps are objective. The zone, like the words in the zoning order can be objective, but the meanings behind them and the reasons why places are called what they are, the topography, like the rivers, the mountains, all those things don't necessarily move unless we move them. But those ultimately, these types of gatherings, until we are at a place where we aren't dealing with genocides, where we aren't dealing with, excess death, like where we actually are providing everybody's services equally and equitably, and just because we're human, then maybe we could pull away from that advocacy and planning conversation. But I don't think we're at that point. So I also, of course, want to take the time to express gratitude and for my ancestors, my elders, my colleagues that are here today, both who presented today, as well as all of you all who took the time to listen to myself and others. And think about the models that we have. We have the tools, we have the resources. And I know this was just supposed to be a advocacy planning conversation, but I know many of us are needing some direction and needing some encouragement in the moment right now. So hopefully that my little part here and our little conversation today will give you that. And yeah, this is how you can keep up with me. Definitely listen to the podcast. Definitely get on the newsletter. I do have a self-study. And then, of course, if you have something that you're doing that's like in alignment, let's talk about possibly being a podcast guest. That's going to come back in the fall. But in the spirit of Trisha Hershey and her rest ministry, or nap ministry rather, I'm largely resting, working a little bit outside of sector right now. And of course, taking this summer to regenerate and reconfigure and prepare for what's next. So I'm going to end share and turn it back over. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you so much for that, Kristen. I appreciate you. I think for this, we'll start. I have a question for you all. First, we'll get started as folks get their own questions ready. So I think let me bring y'all up so we can. Oh, there you go. Honest though, I'm like, let me do the thing and the thing happens. So I think we heard a lot about how we show up through the lived experience, through coming from other communities, through being other. And in social work practice, we have something that we call secondary trauma. Now, secondary trauma usually happens when you're working, for example, let's say that you're working with victims of a particular crime. as a therapist, you begin to own that narrative so much, and you're there and you're showing up, and you begin to embody some of the traumas that your client may be presenting. So my question, thinking about secondary traumas, when we come from experiences or come from like a lived experience, how do you manage to navigate the secondary trauma within the system? I feel like we all need a deep breath after that.
Man,
Who
that's
wants to go first?
I can speak
I got it.
briefly.
Yeah,
Okay, because I feel
Yeah.
like y'all are gonna come with the gems, so let me just go ahead briefly. I would say this is a real struggle. I would say I don't have a answer that, one size fits all. I have a really great family unit, and they allow me space and time to process things. Without them and without really truly having someone who understands how my mind works and how I do embody other people's traumas, I don't think I would honestly survive. And then I would say my team. Some of my team is on. Natalia's on online, so I'm gonna wave to her. She's really truly helped me figure out that balance between, okay, you have to put this down because it is consuming you. And so I think having a really great team, empowering them, collaborating with them, and creating an environment where they can call you out, like in the sense of, you need to remove yourself, you need to rest, you need to put this down, I think is really important. So I would say, again, I know I don't think it's an answer or a solve. It's challenging. And I think all of us come to this work because we are so emotionally attached to it. So it can be very challenging.
for sure. I don't have a good answer either. So like hard trying to detach when you go home, it's like you go home with them too. So like their problems come home with you even if you try to leave them where they are. So I would agree with Courtney or chime on to the fact that like having a supportive family and friends that are just like, look, we out trying to tee up a little bit. You ain't gotta bring that with you. You don't gotta we don't want to hear about it. Not because we don't care about you, but because you're carrying so much extra baggage that you're taking some of like the fun out of the work, some of the love out of the work, and some of the passion out. So it's definitely an ongoing struggle. But finding a space to say like you got to be okay in order to be okay for the work.
Yeah. So for me, that is why I've gone back to things that have brought me joy in the past. And yes, fiber arts. Like during when we couldn't go outside. Now I know folks were going outside, and of course, in solidarity, I tried to stay in the house because a lot of my family was frontline and knows frontline. So I was like, okay, what can I do? And of course, my mom taught me to sew, and I wasn't sewing masks. I was trying to crochet one because that's a little easier on my hands for me in my mind. And yes, my partner Les, as many of you all know her, love her, have seen her work. Like now at times, of course, yeah, people have been wondering like, what kind of conversations do y'all have? But we've been really good about doing things that we love. Like I was at Stitch Night last night. I have a whole Instagram for all this crafting, and just especially since we got to wait so long for so many of our projects, even our good community projects, it's nice to be able to sit down and within a couple days, couple weeks, I got some clothes, I got a bag. I can teach my hands that I'm making something again. And then I've started language study again. Like, Richard, I'm trying to join y'all down there, be able to keep up with you when you've been switching. I'm like, okay, I know, like my Duolingo score is getting up there. I actually started my Spanish language study in middle school because I'm serious. I'm also wanting to connect. I've been told that I do and I want to be clear, may have some tribal ancestry in the States, like of our Carolina tribes. So I want to reconnect with that. So genealogy and looking into that, just really rooting myself in the fact that we're all the same. This is one earth. We're all earthlings. And yeah, of course, my insight timer numbers are up there. I'm on day like 500. I gotta be. So I don't turn out like I did earlier this week where I'm having to monitor my health, like blood pressure, stress, anxiety. And yes, right now I am working out Like financial pressures have been a huge thing for me lately. It's no secret. And just really identifying and saying and speaking, this is what I need, community. This is not what I need. This is how you're hurting me. This is how you're helping me. Like being clear. Like I know for many of us, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to call in each other in our organizations. But I could crochet all the things in the world, but I'm gonna still walk out the door and have to call in people, especially in this vortex of DC where we're all over the place right now. So those are the things that are helping me. My people, my family has come around to like who I've become. And yes, just going in a store, going and touching some fabric. Like it's my version of touching grass. And in some cases it is touching grass because it's either cotton or linen. So that's all set problem.
I love that. And no, I saw so many good little gems also being dropped in the chat. I said rest is resistance, hella true. I saw in there guard your heart, which I think is very beautiful. I love that. I had to learn to apply that. But I'm gonna be hella real with you. I get ratchet once a month. Similarly to what you said, I was like, I gotta check in with myself now. I'm not the same person. Yesterday I took a 3-hour dance class because I was like, I need to move the body. But I get ratchet once a month. Listen, don't ask me when, but at once a month I am out to 9 o'clock in the morning. I have another question. If folks who are still joining us, please feel free to raise your hand if you have a question. There's still some time for questions. And I'll ask another one while folks are getting inspired and queued up. Listen, okay, so for me, oh yes, you got a hand. Okay, so I'll ask this question and then we'll ask Kesha to turn on their mic so they can ask the question, and then there'll be 2 questions on the table. Again, I mentioned this in the introductory dissent, but for me, I think it's always that motion of like, okay, coming from LA, we are a hot mess in LA. Let me be hella real, right? We had so many scandals of like city council members and planning commissioners getting bribes and the whole thing. And you see this happening in every government agency. The scale of bribery and the scale of foolishness may be smaller, but it's still out there. And it's always been hard to know, like, what is our role as planners? Particularly, I think for me, the big question is always during the construction phase of a project, because that's when, like, the planner doesn't necessarily have their hands in the project. But at what point is an urban planner being held accountable? Now, in the same way that engineers are out here signing plans, right? And that's only for licensure and accountability. That's because you got to blame somebody. At what point do the urban planners get held accountable? We have so much power. Again, going back to like what I mentioned earlier, that discrepancies between South Central and West Hollywood and how I saw it growing up. So when I found out there was a planning body that decided that South Central needed to be the space with the most number of liquor stores and hotels per capita, and we have 7 Starbucks in a square mile around USC, like, no, that's not okay. And so I'm curious to think from your experiences, have there been moments or do you think there are opportunities in which the urban planner can get held accountable? Now, I'm not saying all planners are bad. I mean, there's some of us who are here infiltrating all that stuff, but then there's some of us like, go ahead, take a seat. So that's the question. What are the moments and strategies and how we can hold urban planners accountable? And then Kesha, I'm gonna let you come off on mic and ask your question, please.
Thank you, Richard. Hi, you all. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate this message. Y'all dope. I didn't know you exist. Honestly, I got out of urban planning. I was taking it actually as a master's program, and I got out of it because I'm way too, yeah, I don't have that, all that what you all were talking about, like you just mentioned. So my question, it's a concept. I don't know if you all are familiar with the book Soul of a Citizen. And the concept of replacing oneself when during such deep work in advocacy. I wonder, are you all designing? I love that. Also, I forget who mentioned it, but design thinking. That's my whole thing. That's my whole thing. To design accordingly, because outside of systems that don't serve us. And in that, so how do you pass on your knowledge or even share? Yes, Soul of a Citizen. That's the book. How do you plan to like pass the torch is what the book basically states, because you're drained, again, what you all had said. Have you identified so the work doesn't get lost? You have various time frames within the work, and the youngest one is the GOAT. I understand it's being called the GOAT, right? Oh, you accept it, lady, accept it. Okay. You got to, because I know that the work is dope. And I'm also the side note, I was looking for you because I have family in the Dallas area that is also activist, and I'm going there for my family reunion. I just want to visit that area you in South Dallas you were talking about. So nevertheless, my question is, have you all thought about, or do you all have someone? I know you have people wrapping yourself around one another, but to replace you or to give you that break, because in the book, The Soul of Us, yep, thank you, whoever, yep, drop the link, that's the book. It states that you're so drawn out, you just need a replacement, because we can't keep holding this. As Courtney said, you can't keep holding, the pain and seeing these things. But we want to maintain the institution and the work that you've done. Have you all thought about that? That was my question.
Oh man. To be honest,
I tend to do that. Sorry.
no. That's a good question. To be honest, I hadn't really thought about it like from like in my company, because it's just me. But I do see it in people around me, like that are doing the work in different instances. So like I feel like passing the torch, like from Kristen to me. I feel like I want to show up when she can't. And then for me to like colleagues that I have that are doing the work, even in Texas or outside of Texas, like when I feel like I can't show up, that's me in a way passing the torch of like I don't got it in me this week, this day, this month. And so that's a good question. Like you're right, you can't do it like this forever. And so I think I see that, for me at least, passing it on for people around me, close to me, doing the work similar to me.
Yeah, so talk about succession plans. So I try to pour into D and others that I know that have just gotten good started in this. I realized for me, like I took some hits, I still take some hits. And so as far as succession planning, like ultimately I want to see through a good chunk of what I'm doing just so I can receive the money that's out there, not to become this state entity that doesn't do by the community, but to have the mechanism. Because as we know, especially those of us who work more in health and everything, the money sits in donor advised funds, and it can come to you in a certain way if you have the apparatus. But me as a person, as a designer, now I'm gonna make stuff, like I'm gonna fiddle with like fabric and yarn and all of that regardless. I do it, like it's people that I don't want to see in my stitch group. And I'm like, okay, well, I've learned boundaries in my urban planning work. So I don't have to fool with y'all tonight. I'm gonna just sit at home. I'm gonna turn on stuff that I want to listen to. I'm gonna like cuddle with Les, and we're gonna goof off in here with all of our stuffies and the things we do here at home and eat and enjoy ourselves. But yeah, as people have been wondering, so I am trying to fundraise so that I can, and part of the reason I've made peace with stepping out of sector and leaning on my media experience from coming up on like 20 years of having just general work experience, period. And I added planning in a few years later, leaning on that to just move the money around, get to know other perspectives, get to see what people are talking about who aren't deep into this planning cluster of things, but ultimately my goal is to continue to have a degree of independence, building on retirement. I'm looking at places. I'm actively seeking, those of you who read the newsletter, I am community shopping. So anybody who wants to have me come into my community, any of my NC folks that want to convince me to come home, even though our law situation is already kind of rough, but you know, I'm looking for folks that have a sense of what I'm calling fight back right now.
Right.
Not be on the front lines all the time, because all I'm seeing is it's gonna fall on us as Black feminine people right now to fix the
Right.
world. And I'm like, cut it off. No, but
Right.
just somewhere where I can dwell. And so yes, there are things that are gonna go to the community. The concept of Black urbanism is not mine. So I've already like divested that might be mine.
Okay.
You know, I'm opening up these channels, but ultimately, I, the artist, I, the person, I, the human, don't need the titles. But I would love, and anybody who's listening, please let's have that conversation around fundraising and connecting and building the infrastructure. And if you have interns that you subsidize, I would love to have them, because that way I can feed and continue to build this work. So it will become a curriculum. My self-study will become an alternative like certification. I do believe we need another certification out here. For those who need certifications, we need alternatives. And this conversation is feeding into me today as well. Like getting to come back here and come back into planning space and having supportive people. But yeah, let me yield the floor, because Courtney has some things,
Yes.
I'm sure. So here's your turn. Let me
Thank
stop
you.
talking over here.
I think you all have all said a lot of things I think that resonate with me for sure. I'm going to answer the second question, the citizen or soul of a citizen. And this is recorded, so I'm not going to necessarily say the word I usually put in there, but I'm always training folks.
Hey.
I want to work myself out of a job. I want the community to feel so empowered that they don't need me anymore. Every single project that I work on, I want to leave you with some tool, some resource, something that you can feel empowered and you can have ownership of the process just a little bit more. So that's sort of my goal there. And then I would also say, as far as succession, I'm a collaborator. So my practice, SCARD, which is the Studio for Collaboration, Research, and Design, is a collaborative. So it's not just me. I have folks who come in and I want them to lead projects and for me to support them. I don't want to be the lead on everything. It doesn't need to be my project. It doesn't need to be my perspective.
True.
And then also, because I'm, again, such a collaborator, I'm also a founding partner of Ignite, which is designers from all walks of the design profession coming together and saying, how can we work together? How can we collaborate? And how can we maybe restructure this in a way that centers us as humans and, you know, and then the client's secondary. So we're talking about things like providing the collaborative, providing sabbaticals, right? I'm overworked, I'm overwhelmed with client work. I need to spend X amount of time just going on a trip. I'm interested in this. Like, how can we start to really support each other and pool resources and pool money? So Ignite is definitely one of those things. And I would say that my practice, I wouldn't say it's necessarily formed out of fear, but I remember being in design school and loving Zaha Hadid. And so for you all who may not know, she was one of the first women of color who was an architect, and she was world renowned. She's a star architect, and we only had one, right? And I felt so happy and so proud. And she died so young, so young. And I remember thinking, she tried so hard, she worked so hard, she fought so hard to die so young. She didn't have support, right? And because she was the only one, it was too much for her to bear. And so I'm really hoping that I'm not going to be the only one. I'm bringing everybody with me. It's going to be a party at the top. It's going to be a party at the middle and a party at the bottom. We are just, y'all come on, because I have no idea how I can do this alone. And then I want to maybe go back to the first question about accountability for planners. I think there is a bit of accountability when we talk about the planning level, but I think the accountability needs to trickle down, right? So those community review boards, the architects, the developers, right? You have a voice and a say to hold people accountable when they present to your community association. And if you're in Brooklyn, where I sometimes spend my time in Brooklyn, like they have community boards where you get to vote on whether or not a developer can do a project. Or if you're here in Baltimore, where I am right now, again, they have to bring projects to the community. And I wouldn't say that your vote determines whether or not something is built, but your voice can be heard, right? And if you have a good review board, they will take your thoughts into account. So just because something is zoned for something doesn't necessarily mean that it fits this block, fits this community. So I would definitely continue to advocate in those different rooms for sure.
Thank you so much. You said so many great things were said. I think something to the point of what Kesha brought up and how we continue the work. Honestly, this space has become something else. The chat is hilarious. There are folks who are asking questions about publications and videos and resources, and people are answering, and that's dope. Again, this feels like a network. So every damn seminar, y'all give me more work, and I have to think about, okay, how am I listening to what folks are asking for and making it into a network? So we'll definitely have some new iteration. I do believe also in succession planning. I'm trained as an organizer. And so for me, for example, right now at the Other End Belonging Institute, we're finishing a contract in transportation. That ending is ensuring that there's now a conversation with community members to set the research agenda moving forward. So we know what are the type of projects that we need to be addressing and going after, so that every time, even if I'm out of the work or out of the contract, there is something that we did that was informed by community practice, so we can continue to move forward. That's definitely true. I also tell people I never show up alone. I show up with baggage, and that's community. I show up with folks. I listen. I will definitely would be remiss if I didn't say that it's always been to the point, to Kristen's point, that it has been Black women who have created the space for me to be the planner that I am now. So I could not pay it forward without bringing other folks along the way, because it's just not in my nature. My mother would be mad at me. And speaking of genealogies, I also believe in organizing genealogies, and knowing who are the people that we come from in the movement is important. That being said, I want to kind of get us to the end to wrap us up. Thank you all so much for joining us. Today we had a sold out show. So Zoom decided to update, so the link got a little fucked up. So we were capped at 300, y'all. But that means that there are still people asking us why we couldn't get in. So there was a lot of people waiting. So our apologies on our end. Zoom. We will definitely update the link, and this is going to be recorded and shared with folks. Usually the practice is that we will ask our speakers if they have any resources that they mentioned or shared during the presentation. If they can share it with us, we'll upload it. The Reimagining Urban Planning is not going to have oh no, hold on, they're hitting me up over here. We're going to have a resource landing page. So over the last 4 seminars, there's been a lot of resources that have been shared. So through our platform at the Other End Belonging Institute, which is the Other End Belonging OBI University, we have a lot of modules and classes that are free on our concepts of bridging and belonging without othering. There's new work and new courses that are being offered. Reimagining Urban Planning is going to be uploaded there as well. And please join us August 8th for the fun series that is coming up. The next one is called Reimagining Reimagining Urban Planning. That's where we're on now. See, it's called Urban Planning and its relationship to land. So here we'll be talking about urban planning as a project of settler colonialism and how neocolonization continues to play out in urban planning. So what are the ways that we can address it? Do we even need ownership? Like, why are we out here owning land? So we're gonna get into some of those big meta questions. Also, just so you can know, be on the lookout. I'm gonna reach out to all of you. If you have registered on our Every Action page, we have a listserv going on. So I'm about to send an email to each and every one of you. There's about 3,600 of you, but I will email to each and one of you just to hear what's going on, how we can make this better, and how we can shift it. This feels like a first iteration, like I mentioned earlier. People are listening and it's a little wild. There are folks who have joined the call from all over the world. We have folks in Kenya, we have folks in London, we have folks in Canada. Also, shout out to Canada. A lot of people in Canada follow me, and I'm like, what y'all doing out there? Why y'all want to know about me? Listen, all the people that follow me who are not from the US are from Vancouver and Toronto. I'm like, what y'all up to? Why? So I'm gonna reach out to folks out there. Again, everybody, thank you for joining us to another session of Reimagining Urban Planning. And of course, like every session, I'm a say goodbye with some more Beyonce. I'm a
Hey.